Man, I mean, everything was going great, wasn't it? I mean, not great, but pretty well for a pandemic. People getting vaccinated, things opening back up, that light at the end of the tunnel was shining a little brighter. What could possibly go wrong? Oh. If you want to pause this and go buy toilet paper, I understand. Here's the story. All right, thank you. Thank you for being with us. This is the story, and you know what? Let's get right into it tonight. The governor just closed indoor dining again. COVID cases are spiking again. Hospitalizations are up again. So we closed restaurants again. Governor Brown moved 15 counties into extreme risk, including Multnomah and Clackamas. So I hope your Mother's Day brunch plans involved patio seating. Brown did increase outdoor capacity from 50 to 100 because all the restaurants I go to have room for 100 people outside. She also promised to fast-track $20 million in relief funding for small businesses. None of this should be shocking to you, right? It's a pattern. Cases and deaths go up, the governor closes restaurants, and every time I get emails from people asking, why restaurants specifically? Why am I allowed to sort through dad khakis at the Gap all live long day, but I can't split an app with the missus over a pint? Well, it's because OHA believes in data that suggests restaurants spread COVID. Last month, the CDC released new studies that show when cities relax restaurant restrictions, cases and deaths go up. The director of the CDC said, you have decreases in cases and deaths when you wear masks, and you have increases in cases and deaths when you have in-person restaurant dining. Now, of course, this isn't gospel. These findings have been disputed, mainly by people in the restaurant industry, but they've been disputed. They argue that you can't blame restaurants specifically when there are so many factors that could contribute to a spike in cases. In a statement from the National Restaurant Association, they said, if a positive correlation between ice cream sales and shark attacks is found, that would not mean that ice cream causes shark attacks. But that said, the collective data is rather convincing, especially to this headline writer from Forbes who wrote a piece titled, "There's no denying the evidence. Restaurants and bars are helping spread COVID-19." It cites two studies from Johns Hopkins and Stanford that tracked credit cards and cell phones and found that when people go out to eat and drink, the virus spreads more rapidly in their communities. And speaking of our communities, what happens when we close our neighborhood restaurants? Well, I know two things, right? First, cases will go back down, according to that highly sourced yet disputable data. The second thing is not disputable at all. It's definite. You don't need a single case study to figure it out or any whiz kids from an Ivy League. When you close or dramatically restrict businesses, some of them can't survive. Some of them never fully open back up. Jobs will be lost, careers will end, unemployment systems will be strained, the financial hardships will creep into people's homes and relationships. It is the rock and hard place dilemma that's been with us through this entire struggle. Save lives but kill businesses, or save businesses and kill people. The OHA and Kate Brown have always picked the former, and it has worked. We have some of the lowest death rates in the country, thanks to progressive policies that were based on our limited weapons against the virus. But we have a new weapon against the virus now, don't we? I got this email from Jim after the announcement. Please ask the OHA why fully vaccinated people are unable to dine inside in the 15 counties. I was wondering the exact same thing, Jim, so I sent your email to the OHA. And they responded by saying, I think the governor's media release today, expanding limits for outdoor dining, etc., addresses that. I'm not sure that it does. And I expect similar questions to keep filling my inbox and theirs. And don't think they don't read them, because they do. They've responded with action to similar criticism. For instance, this week, the OHA changed its mask recommendations for sports. They were making kids in Oregon wear masks while competing in distance running until a kid collapsed at the finish line. Now, the new guidance allows people to take off face coverings when competing in non-contact sports outdoors and maintaining at least 6 feet of distance from others. Now, say what you will about the initial policy, but remember, right now, The data is showing that a resurgence in youth sports is a major factor in the rise of COVID cases across the country. But in this case, this specific situation, we used common sense. We looked at a broad policy that proved to have negative consequences in specific moments, so we adjusted. We changed it. New information equaled new guidelines. So why are we closing indoor dining again? According to the latest numbers, there are 1.2 million people in Oregon who are fully vaccinated. That's nearly 30% of the population, people who can safely sit in a booth and split a plate of nachos. So let them. We have 1 million people who can safely support these restaurants, keep them from laying people off or closing for good. 1 million people who can keep these business owners in business. We deserve the option because we have the option. Listen, if you aren't vaccinated, don't eat inside of a restaurant right now. Seems pretty simple. And this does not feel like a hot take to me. Maybe I'm confused. I kind of thought this was what we were doing. One of the benefits of vaccinating 1 million people. We've been told for a long time now that this vaccine is our greatest weapon against COVID. Let's use it. It's already saving lives. Why won't we let it save businesses? I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Tell me what you think of this take. Give me yours. Send me an email to thestory@kgw.com. Message me on Facebook and Instagram, or use Twitter and the hashtag #HeyDan. In the meantime, and on that note, why don't we count some vaccines right now? More than 1.81 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose. As I just counted, a lot of them, most of them, have gotten their second dose as well. And that puts us at 43% of the state's population with at least one shot. In Washington, more than 3.41 million people have gotten at least one shot, the first dose, which works out to be nearly 45% of Washington's population. Now, we got a lot of questions and comments last night after our story about vaccine hesitancy. If you haven't watched it, Kristen Severance talks about some of the people who are hesitant or resistant to getting the shots at all and what you can do to answer some of their concerns. You can check it out right now on the KGW YouTube channel. But we wanted to take a few minutes now and answer some of the questions that came in immediately after that story. Things like this. Aaron said, one of the things I have heard from several people about vaccine hesitancy is that they can't afford unpaid days off if they have side effects. My husband's company just announced that they wouldn't charge sick days if people had those effects. That helps so many. Now, in both Oregon and Washington, workers are allowed to use their paid sick time either to get the vaccine or to recover from side effects. Oregon and Washington, they both have laws guaranteeing paid sick time for many employees. But that doesn't cover everybody. It doesn't cover people, for instance, who work for smaller businesses or gig workers, or some people who have maybe just started their new job and they haven't worked up those days yet. So companies are providing additional paid time off to get the vaccine or to get people to recover from the vaccine. And President Biden is also calling on every American employee, or employer rather, to offer full pay to their employees for any time off needed to get vaccinated and for any time it takes to recover. He's offering a paid leave tax credit that will offset the cost for employers with fewer than 500 employees, so they can provide full pay for their employees to get vaccinated. Along those same lines, John said, we have been made aware of several individuals who are busy at work and just don't want the hassle of trying to schedule the shot and taking the time to go through that whole process. We've covered that a lot. I mean, that can be a process. I get it. Now, if that's the case with you, one of the best things to do is to go to the Get Vaccinated tool at Oregon.gov. We have a link for you at KGW.com as well. It takes about 5 minutes to sign up, and then you wait a few days and they send you an invitation. And once you get your invitation for a vaccine, it takes a few minutes to schedule your appointment. You choose the time that works best for you. A lot of vaccine clinics also are getting people in and out in less than 90 minutes. I know that's, not lickety-split, but it's not bad for what we're talking about here. There are also pharmacies that are giving out vaccines, which might be a little bit more convenient for you, and the Marion County Fairgrounds. They usually have a lot of appointments open. So you have to check around. I know it's not the easiest thing in the world, but there are ways to make it easier. And in each case, making the appointment takes only a few minutes, and getting the shot doesn't really take all of that long. Now, a lot of people said that their own immune system was enough to protect them from COVID, like Greg, who said, "My good friend isn't COVID vaccine hesitant. She's fully resistant, claims her strong immune system at 70 years old will protect her." Now, yes, your immune system does work to protect you from viruses, but it wasn't quite enough for the 3.12 million people who have died from COVID. The studies have shown that the vaccines produce a much stronger immune response against this virus. Think of it like wearing a helmet when you ride your bike. Yes, your skull will protect your brain, but for some crashes, you're going to want that helmet. There's Bill, who said this: "My wife's sister is hesitant to get the vaccine. She also believes the world is flat. Any suggestions?" Well, Bill's wife's sister, the Earth's round. Let's switch gears here for a second with something we think is worth your time. Portland is once again in the national news, but for the same old story: our endless protests. The New York Times published this piece about how our leaders want to crack down on the group of demonstrators who destroy property, sometimes nightly. Mayor Ted Wheeler says he wants to, quote unquote, unmask these people, which, as you can imagine, hasn't exactly gone over well with the activist crowd. Then again, what does? Here's another sign of this crackdown, this ensuing crackdown. The Multnomah County Sheriff just made it a little easier to put some of the protesters and rioters in jail, especially the ones causing damage. Here's what investigative reporter Kyle Aboshi found out.
Multnomah County Sheriff Mike Reese sent out a special order to deputies allowing people arrested for misdemeanor crimes, including reckless burning and criminal mischief, to be booked into jail. Previously, police officers just issued a citation for the misdemeanor crimes and ordered the person appear at a future court date. The change in booking criteria took effect on April 23rd, according to a memo obtained by KGW. A sheriff's office spokesperson explained the changes were in the interest of public safety and will have little to no impact on the corrections system. The special order comes after a string of violent demonstrations in Portland that resulted in several businesses and public buildings being vandalized.
Our job is to unmask them, arrest them, and prosecute them.
On Friday, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler asked the public to stand together and help crack down on violent protesters by writing down their license plate numbers and sharing video from security cameras.
The violence and property destruction we've seen in Portland for nearly 11 months now is unacceptable.
Last week, Multnomah County DA Mike Schmidt also expressed his frustration.
As district attorney, I will always defend a person's right to free speech, but I'll not defend nor support anyone who knowingly, recklessly, or intentionally destroys property or engages in violence.
The stern public comments from Schmidt and other local leaders marked a shift in tone. Mayor Wheeler hopes an aggressive crackdown will stop the small group of rioters who've broken windows, spray-painted graffiti, and set fires.
Once they cross that line and engage in criminal destruction, they're no longer protesters, they are criminals.
Since the changes in booking criteria took effect on April 23rd, 3 people have been booked into jail on criminal mischief too, according to the sheriff's office. Previously, they would have been cited and released. Kyle Aboshi, KGW News.
Everybody likes a little trash talk, but it's even better to talk about how to clean things up. So here's a way to get involved, one block at a time.
We allow anyone to show love and care for the block that they love the most.
And if you were dreading going to the DMV to get that real ID, good news, you can keep procrastinating for another 2 years. When the story continues. Welcome back. I was just going through some of your emails, getting a lot of them tonight, especially about the restaurants topic. So please keep them coming. Use that email, the story at kgw.com. You can also use the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Your feedback drives the show each and every night. You help decide us what to cover. It really, really matters. So please keep it coming. Time now for a story on solutions. We've also debated calling this segment Trash News, where the news is trash, but we opted for subtlety. We know a few things about it. We know that it is bad, the trash situation. We know that you know it is bad, this trash situation. And we know that people want to fix it. So now, a retired tech consultant has launched a program that's got thousands of Portlanders volunteering to clean up this city, one block at a time. Here's Maggie Vespa.
Adopt One Block. It's a new nonprofit with a healthy Instagram feed. It's based in Portland, and the idea is simple, like the name implies. You sign up online, adopt as little as one block, and commit to keeping it clean long term.
We have reimagined the way we make our city cleaner and happier.
Retired tech consultant Frank Moscow launched Adopt One Block late last year because he sees what we all see. Trash in Portland is piling up at historic rates, and cleanup crews are overwhelmed.
I was appalled by what I saw. I started adopting two really hard blocks myself and started looking around the country to figure out what solutions have been implemented in other places.
What Moscow figured out was for a long time, Portland has only really recruited volunteers for big one-time cleanup events. While those are great, he says, they shouldn't be the only option.
What happens is that in that one-off event, everybody goes away. And you drive by that place a week later, a month later, and it doesn't look very good.
Enter his new nonprofit, Adopt One Block. To sign up, go to their website, adoptoneblock.org, and enter an address. It could be yours, it could be where you work, wherever you want to clean up trash. I put in KGW's. The website then pulls up a map with blocks waiting to be adopted around that site. Pick one and tell Adopt One Block whether it's a standard area or challenging. The latter means you expect to see human waste, needles, or other biohazards. That's important because once you're done, they ship you free cleanup supplies paid for by anonymous donors. And if you need it, they'll include storage containers for dirty syringes. You can also just get info on agencies to call if you want help with those items.
Why didn't I think of that?
Adopt One Block is about 7 months old, and its street cred is growing. As KGW covered last week, longtime Portland architect Homer Williams included expanding its reach as part of his 4-point plan to tackle homelessness.
We will build communities that will be carefully managed and thoughtfully designed.
One of Williams' other pitches, a series of sleek, tiny pod villages scattered throughout the city. Portland City Council is also pushing people to volunteer. Commissioners voted last week to allocate $750,000 to the mayor's new Clean and Green citywide cleanup project, which is led by the decades-old nonprofit Solve. Moscow believes Adopt One Block can speed this work up, especially when you look at this, in his words, heat map of signups. He says more than 2,000 people have signed up, adopting more than 3,000 Portland blocks.
What I am thrilled by is the collective energy and emotion around be the change you wish to see. People care. People want to be engaged in a solution that works. People are saying, I love Portland. Portland can be a clean and beautiful city once again.
Maggie Vespa, KGW News.
And just a side note, for anybody wondering about the status of our planned cleanup that we were doing with the story team here in Solve, the story team, we're organizing this cleanup effort. We want to do it in May. I'm still ironing out the details. I know a lot of you are interested in heading out with us and picking up some trash around this town, cleaning the place up a little bit. Stay tuned. We'll let you know more of the details as soon as I have them. So did you see the news today about Real ID? It's pretty good for all you procrastinators out there. I say good because you procrastinated and worked out, but it's not encouraging you not to procrastinate. Anyhow, see, before today, you had to get a Real ID by October in order to get on a domestic flight without a passport. But since everyone's had such a fun year, the feds decided to push that requirement back to May 2023. Now, whenever we talk about Real ID, I get a bunch of questions about it, like this one from Jane. Hey, Dan, I'm wondering about Oregon's driver's licenses and Real ID. Just renewed my passport and got the license as well. Does that mean I don't need the Real ID, just the driver's license? So first of all, no one has to get a real ID. Your driver's license still works as a driver's license. No big deal. Now, if you want to get on a plane after that deadline, you will need either the real ID or a passport. And that's to fly domestically. You want to hop down to San Francisco, you'll need one of those two things. So as long as you have a passport, if you have one, and you remember to take it to the airport with you every time you go somewhere, then you don't need the real ID or your license, really. Karen wrote me and said, I'm sitting in DMV right now waiting to get my real ID, and would say 95% of the people who want to get the real ID don't have the proper forms needed. Might be a good idea to refresh people's minds on what they need to get it and when it will be required. So that is a pretty good idea. Thanks for bringing it up. Now, the DMV's website has this handy guide, tells you everything that you need to bring. That includes something to prove your identity, and lawful status, so birth certificate, passport, certificate of citizenship, that sort of stuff. You also need 2 documents that prove you are a resident, that you live here, basically something that has your name and address on it, like your regular driver's license, for instance, a piece of mail, a paycheck, or a lease agreement. Again, the DMV has a list of what they will accept on their website. So how did we get here? The Real ID Act was actually developed after 9/11 and has been in place since 2005. The main idea was to make a more secure form of identification for people to board domestic flights and to get into secure federal buildings. Some states have been compliant with the act for close to a decade, while others, like Oregon, decided to hold out. They didn't like the idea of the federal government telling them what to do and telling the states they had to pay for it. There was also concern over real IDs being used as a way to intimidate people who are living in this country undocumented. See, to get a real ID, you have to prove citizenship, just like a passport. So the federal government kept extending the deadline for states to become Real ID compliant. In 2020, Oregon became one of the last states to comply and began issuing Real ID cards. Everyone was told they had to get a Real ID by October of this year in order to get on a domestic flight without a passport. But because the pandemic has made it hard for people to get to the DMV, the feds are now extending that deadline to May 2023, which means you have a couple of extra years to update your ID. And that's how we got here. A lot of the people have opinions on this restaurant topic. I'm swiping through the phone right now trying to figure out what comments I want to address. They're pretty complicated, I guess, but I'm going to take a crack at it when we finish the story next. Okay, Mary wrote me a multi-part question here. It opens, are you a moron or maybe just your writers? I'll address that in a moment. The second you open up anything for the group that is willing to have already gotten vaccinated, this does 0 for those who are vaccine hesitant or anti-vaxxers. They may not get vaccinated, but it won't stop them from eating out or going out in groups, continuing to spread. Just hang on, people. This 4th wave is because of we're relaxing, and where does that get us? Okay, where should I start? Are you a moron? I don't think so, but that's subjective. My writers definitely are not. When it comes to that argument that anti-vaxxers or people who are hesitant or refusing to get the vaccine are not going to get the vaccine, well, when is that going to change? Right? Eventually, the vaccine is going to be easy for anyone to get. You're not going to have to hustle for an appointment. Most people are going to be vaccinated. You'll be able to go probably get walk-up appointments. They're doing that in California now. At what point do we realize that the people who are vaccinated are protected from this virus? And we're going to have to make steps according to that eventually. That's part of my argument today. I got another one from Dynamite. Nice. On Twitter. I think the increase in cases is from opening schools. It's not businesses. See, that's the thing. There are a bunch of reasons why cases go up. They don't think it's from in-person classes. There's been a lot of studies on that. They think that it's mainly from kids hanging out together in groups or in contact sports. Once those kicked up, we saw a big spike in cases. Should we stop contact sports then too? Completely shut those down? How do you think that would go over? I mean, these are the discussions that are happening right now. Restaurants are the only ones that are going out of business because of it. I appreciate the takes. Keep them coming. Let's have this conversation. I certainly don't know everything. I'm just a guy on TV. See you back here tomorrow.